So when it comes to the current state of Bluey, there's really not that much happening right now. Season 3 somehow wrapped up more than a year ago already, and while we have gotten some extra content such as the minisodes and a new movie announcement for 2027, there really hasn't been that much news for the actual show itself. I've mentioned this already in so many past videos that you're probably more than tired of me saying it, but just in case for the new people in the back, yes, the people in charge have come out and said that Bluey isn't over, and that more is in store for the show, but regarding what we could actually expect, we basically have no idea. No episode plots, no characters, or frankly, any details whatsoever. And as far as I know, I don't think I've even heard anyone specifically state we're actually getting a 4th season, just that we're getting some kind of future content. But with how popular the show remains, I would say it's pretty likely. And with the consideration that a 4th season is pretty likely, I think it would be fun to speculate on what this potential season could entail. So for today, we'll be taking a break from the actual news and going into speculation territory as we imagine some ideas for a season 4. And yes, before anyone mentions it, I am very well aware that I am definitely not the first person to do this, as this topic has been covered to death by numerous clickbait channels out there, all promising how Bluey Wee color number 324 is gonna be the next healer brother or whatever. So I guess you could take this video as a more, I suppose, honest take on this big discussion, or maybe I'm just desperate and hopping on this bandwagon while the iron is frozen solid. You're more than welcome to imagine it either way. But anyways, enough messing around, let's roll in like it's 2nd grade up in here and get our thinking brains moving. So regarding what stories could be covered in a 4th season, there's honestly so much they could do. Because while the sign does serve as a perfect finale for the first 3 seasons, it also does actually leave some pretty good space for new stories. And with this in mind, I think we can already predict some pretty good ideas just by continuing from here. For instance, I feel like we're definitely gonna get an episode about the healers moving back in, or at least just getting used to their original routine. Because while they didn't actually move at the end, it's pretty clear that they have been planning this for a while, and likely already arranged a ton of things before they changed their minds at the last minute. So with that, I think it would be fun to see an episode where they have to figure out where everything goes again, or making some sort of game out of moving the furniture or whatever, which honestly sounds super boring now that I say it out loud, but could honestly work as Bluey does strive off of making ordinary topics creative and fun. And regarding the other characters we saw, I feel confident we'll also definitely get some more episodes about Muffin's side of the family too. During the events of the sign, we saw that Stripe and Trixie didn't exactly have the best time, with Stripe himself literally being abandoned in a bush after a presumably drunk night. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they took inspiration from that potential conflict as well. Although with that said, I kinda doubt they'll go as far as to just straight up divorce. I know some YouTubers out there have dropped this idea before and it's a pretty popular prediction, but part of me feels like it's just not very likely, as admittedly it would be a pretty interesting premise and relatable for a lot of viewers including myself, but to me it seems a little bit too intense, even for a show like Bluey. And I feel like even if they did want to cover this, it would probably be with a more obscure or less important set of characters, as opposed to a more prominent couple like Stripe and Trixie. And in fact, if you really think about it, they kinda already did this, with Winton's dad being divorced himself and finding a new partner in season 3, the arc of which also happened to conclude in the sign. Also, speaking of the sign, when Trixie is seen arguing with him, I'm like 90% sure it was because of what he did earlier by spoiling Rad's plans to move Frisky, and not because they were genuinely not getting along or having marriage issues. Context matters, everyone. So yeah, I don't think they'll go that far with Stripe and Trixie, but I can definitely still see another episode where they do have some sort of conflict, such as still figuring out how to raise Muffin again, or even figuring out what to do with Socks, who, to be honest, tends to get left out a lot knowing how Muffin is. And continuing our discussion about extended family and the sign, I also think we'll definitely see more of Brandy as well. With her being pregnant in the sign, it would be pretty weird if they just completely forgot about this big moment and didn't show her baby in at least some form. So I think we'll also definitely get at least some kind of episode about that. And while this seems like pretty standard family stuff, I do think it actually could be pretty interesting, as an episode with Bluey and Bingo trying to figure out like what to do with this baby or how to play with it could actually make for a pretty fun episode. And yeah, I guess you could argue they already sorta did this with Socks when she was first introduced, but since this was still at a time when infants acted like actual dogs in the show, which was later retconned in Baby Race, I feel like Brandy's baby could be a good chance to show a more human-style dynamic between the kids and a new baby character, as opposed to someone like Socks who was like this feral dog, who more acted closer to like a weird pet of sorts than an actual baby. And to also address the elephant in the room, I will also admit that this might not go over the most well with everyone, because just the idea of Brandy being pregnant was actually kinda controversial, if you can believe that, as some fans believed it went against the whole plot in Onesies where she came to terms with not being able to have a baby, only for her to later have a baby. And while I do agree it was a pretty sudden turn of events, I'm not gonna act like this is something that keeps me up at night, and I suppose it is technically possible, so there's that to consider. But of course, outside of just Brandy, we also have to mention one more set of characters, which is of course Rad and Frisky, the newly married couple of the special itself. They haven't been featured that much in the show, but it's pretty clear the show's writers do still value them quite a bit. And besides the fact that they're arguably fan favorites and already quite popular, there's one obvious detail in the sign that I've somehow never noticed until recently, which is that Rad and Frisky actually plan on moving into the same area as the rest of the family.
Oh, it'll be lovely having you two close by.
Yeah, it will, but what about your job?
I'll find a new one.
How I didn't notice this when they literally stopped everything to announce it and had an entire scene discussing it is honestly beyond me. But anyways, my main point is that this is not only just setting up the two for a happy ending, but actually setting them up to appear more frequently in future episodes. Because if you think about it, the only reason their appearances were so limited in the first place, at least in universe, was because Rad was out on an oil rig working and couldn't visit too often. But now that this barrier of sorts is gone, it gives the writers a lot more excuse to return these fan favorites, and with their closer connections, a lot more chances to feature them in new stories with the characters we already know. I'm honestly not really sure what new things they could do with them, but an episode where we see all three Healer brothers together or having even some sort of rivalry could honestly go super hard. And regarding Frisky, I would go off of what she said in Christmas to him about the healers being a bit crazy, and maybe have an episode about her, I guess basically trying to fit in with the new family, and getting used to their sometimes crazy shenanigans at a party or something. Which I could see actually being really relatable for people who are like meeting the families of their significant others, and finding it awkward at first trying to fit in. I mean, let's be honest, if she thought the Healer family was crazy just because of Rad alone, just imagine how nuts it'll be when she spends more time with someone like Muffin, Stripe, or even Bingo again, but on a particularly crazy day. That right there could honestly be a great episode in the making. However, with all of that said, there is one plot I highly doubt will happen, which is a Rad and Frisky baby episode. I know a lot of people have speculated about this one, but as of now I have my doubts. Mainly just because I feel like it'll be a bit too early, considering how fast everything else already went, and with Brandy herself already having a baby, it would be kinda redundant from a writing perspective, although it could still be a possibility. So with a brand new season in mind, another element that I'm sure a lot of people want to see is the return of older characters. Because while the Healer family are of course the main group, and will obviously get the most episodes, there have been a fair share of others who also contribute to the show, either in multiple episodes or even just once. And with this in mind, I think it's worth speculating on which of these other characters is most likely to return. Starting off with the ones that I think are personally the least likely, let's begin with the characters voiced by celebrities. Like most popular cartoons, Bluey does have a few characters voiced by famous actors, or at least people known for other work besides the show itself. And while some of these characters do have some decent plot relevance, there's also quite a few that have really small roles or honestly feel like they were just made to give a certain actor a quick cameo, such as Bucky Dunstan voiced by Rove McManus, the surfboard guy voiced by Mick Fanning, or even the legendary equine himself, Major Tom the Horse, voiced by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yeah, I don't want to believe that Bucky and Tom aren't coming back either, but honestly, I do feel like their returns are not very likely. Although, with that said, in regards to the other characters, I still feel like there's quite a few that will definitely return, simply because they are way too relevant to just disappear, such as Calypso, Trixie, and of course Brandy, just to name some examples. And on top of that, I also feel like there are some other characters who might also see a return, with Alfie and Rusty's dad being two that come to mind. As I can't imagine getting Anthony Field and Robert Irwin would be as difficult, as all of them and Bluey do have some sort of connection, as they're all kinda related to icons of Australian pop culture, with Anthony Field being of course one of the original Wiggles members, Robert Irwin being the son of the late Steve Irwin, and Bluey being, well, Bluey of course. And I feel like this relationship between them would make it easier for them to collab as like a tribute to Australian pop culture and representation that I'm sure they'd be more than happy to return for. And on top of that even, while this is a very minor thing, I did notice that in the Bluey's World attraction, or at least a picture of it, the merchandise store for the place is actually named after Alfie himself, which is actually pretty cool. So it seems like the people in charge definitely know who he is and are keeping him in mind. And also, even outside of that, another random one I wanted to add is Maynard too. I feel like there's not really that much they could do with him, but with how much of a fan favorite he is along with Mort, I definitely hope we get to see at least another episode with him in some form. And when it comes to the other characters, there's honestly way too many for all of them to return, but I do hope we'll get to see at least a few of them back in the spotlight, such as redeemed characters like Judo and Hercules still finding their place amongst Bluey's friends, or even some other characters like Captain and Mia popping in to help out or join the main cast again. I'm honestly surprised the latter two haven't been featured more often already, because it's pretty clear they had a lot of effort put into their design and introduction, and it's also kinda implied that Bluey and Mackenzie are already good friends with them, meaning that they probably meet on an at least somewhat regular basis. And in general, I think it would be honestly just kind of fun to see more stuff from the older kids of the show, as a lot of them do have their small moments here and there, but also tend to kinda get forgotten. Also, speaking of forgotten, another character that definitely has to return more is of course Grandpa Bob. He's been one of those characters that basically just went missing for years, only to then suddenly turn up in the sign and come back? But anyways, now that he's officially returned from his adventure or whatever, and doesn't have to be contacted through a Ouija board like we thought, I could definitely see him become more relevant in the future. Although I can't really imagine him becoming anywhere as popular as Mort, who's honestly just way more fun. Sorry to the Grandpa Bob fans out there, I'm on Team Mort for this one. So before we end this video off, I wanted to present some other more random ideas I thought of that I could either totally see happening or are just kind of hoping for. These are the ones I'd consider to be the less important, or even dare I say, the dreaded, horrifying filler episodes. Scary, I know. But basically, these are the episodes that won't be a part of the main arcs or serious moments of the season, and just kinda there to be simple fun. But anyways, to start, more locations. We tend to get a few of these in every season, and honestly, they're usually some of my favorites, both as a fun look at Brisbane itself, and a neat change up from the normal routine. Now, I'm not gonna come in here and act like I know Brisbane more than the locals, because I watched some random cartoon dog for 5 years, but just off the top of my head, I would honestly love to see the characters visit more specific attractions and parts of the city, which I can't imagine would be that hard to get permission for, as the characters have arguably done so much to promote the city to a global audience. And for more specific ideas, I don't really know the attractions of Brisbane that well or the area, but I think an episode centered around a sports game of sorts would be tons of fun. Just recently, I was at a baseball game, and I couldn't help but notice how many families were there, with kids who were clearly not interested in anything happening whatsoever, as their parents really struggled to get them excited. And this isn't me like ranting about the new generation or anything like that, because honestly, I was the exact same way when I was their age. But my point is that it would be hilarious to see Bluey cover this scenario, with Bandit instead taking his kids to a cricket match or something, only for them to just want to play on their tablets or making up their own games instead out of boredom. And on top of that, maybe even Rusty could be with them too and like embarrassing Bandit because he ends up knowing way more about the sport than he does, or something like that. Or heck, maybe if they really wanted to, they could even include Lucky and Pat, which would finally give Yellow John Luke something to actually do. And of course, finally, outside of all of that, we have also what is arguably the most important idea of all of them. That's right, the moment you've all been waiting, no begging for, the return of the alternate energy dog. The all-time GOAT will make his comeback, and he will make that sale. Absolute peak fiction, Ludo should just hire me. So with that, those were all of my predictions for Bluey Season 4. In summary, I predict that the most important arcs will be about the healers moving back in, another Trixie Stripe conflict but no divorce, Brandy's new baby, a Healer Brothers episode or rivalry of sorts, and Frisky getting used to the healers, but no baby. And in addition to all of that, I also predict that Judo, Hercules, and Alfie will get some kind of prominent role, along with some sort of notable appearance from also Captain, Mia, and Grandpa Bob. And on top of all of that, for additional stories, an episode where the healers visit the main city again, visit some sort of big attraction, and or an episode where they either attend a cricket or maybe even rugby game of sorts. Once again, I should make it very clear that Season 4 is likely still far away, assuming it's even coming out, and that everything you hear right now is purely just rumors and ideas. So I more than welcome y'all to take what I say with a big grain of salt and come to your own conclusions instead of just taking my word as gospel. Because for all I know, I could look back on this in a couple years and realize that I was totally wrong. Wouldn't be the first time in my life. But with all of that said, let me know your thoughts and ideas down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we reach 100k. And until next time, my name's Hideaki, and I'll be signing out. Goodbye everyone.